Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to take a look back at week 28 of the 2020 season of the Overwatch League, the second to last week of the 2020 regular season. So let's just take a look real quick and throw up my spreadsheet so you can see everything that happened. 8-4 overall, 1-1 in big pick games. Let's jump into it. Let's talk about what happened, starting with Friday. Everything on Friday went exactly as planned, at least as I expected it to go. Seoul Dynasty, 3-0 win over the London Spitfire. Florida Mayhem with a win over the Vancouver Titans, 3-1. And the LA Gladiators with a 3-0 victory over the Dallas Fuel in my big pick game from Friday. So, nothing too surprising there. The winning teams looked as good as you kind of would expect. The Titans getting a map off the Mayhem was a little surprising, but other than that, everything went about as planned. The Gladiators did win way bigger against the Fuel than I expected, but I thought that one was a pretty good chance to be a good game. But I favored the Gladiators in that one. Moving on to Saturday, we'll talk about the NYXL Dynasty game here in a little bit. To start, we have the Shanghai Dragons beating the London Spitfire, securing themselves the #1 record in the Overwatch League for the 2020 season. Absolute crazy turnaround to go from 0-40 to best team in the league in just 2 years. Against a very tough competition in Asia. Very impressive from the Shanghai Dragons. The Atlanta Reign lost to the Paris Eternal. Once again, not too surprising. Close series, 3-2. A lot of weird comps from the Atlanta Reign. Devil threw the Eternal off. The Eternal looked a little lost at times, but they came back and won when it mattered. Dallas Fuel, a convincing 3-0 victory over the Vancouver Titans, avenging their defeat from the last time they played, when the Titans secured their first win of the season with the new roster. About what you'd expect from that one. LA Gladiators beating the Boston Uprising. First time in the history of both of those franchises that the LA Gladiators have beaten the Boston Uprising, so that's pretty good. We'll talk about the Shock Fusion game in a little bit. Moving on to Sunday, Seoul Dynasty, very convincing win again over the London Spitfire. Very good weekend from the Dynasty. And the Shock win against the Defiant, 3-0. We'll talk about those last two Sunday games here in a second. But let's start with the two games on Saturday that I skipped over very quickly. And let's talk about Seoul versus New York. Now, I did not watch this game in depth. I watched some highlights for this game, watched some of the stuff that went down with the game. I was very busy Saturday morning, so I didn't really have the time to sit down and watch it. But what was very interesting to me were the players that New York was playing and the compositions they were running with them. I don't know if New York didn't really particularly care about the match against the Seoul Dynasty. I would imagine they did at least somewhat, but I felt like it was very weird to see the compositions they were running and the players they were running. Hotba came back in the lineup. I don't know why. I don't really agree with that. I don't really see why you'd bring Hotba back when I think Bianca has been very good. Even if we haven't seen Bianca really play the Diva yet this season. That's the hero that I knew Bianca was good at already, and I thought that Hotba's Diva in particular has been very, very weak this season. He hasn't really peeled for his team very much, although that was really the most obvious hero where he was kind of struggling. He was getting some good self-destructs, but it was beyond that, it was kind of meh. Then they had Mondu in, which isn't really a problem, I think. I think it's important to work Mondu into the roster. I think he's a very important piece for the future. But what was really weird to me was how much Libero they were playing. And they were playing Libero on Hitscan. He was playing Ashe. I don't really understand why. Why is Nene playing the Sombra when you have SBB who plays Sombra? Why is Libero playing the Ashe when you know that Nene is the better Ashe? It was just weird decision making and weird coaching decisions. Unless someone couldn't play and that's why those two were playing, I think it's really weird. But I don't want to take away from the Seoul Dynasty either. I thought they played very well. I thought their compositions looked very clean all weekend. When you can put Gesture on the Winston, you play very well. And things work very well when the Dynasty have the lineup that kind of works for them. I think 2U has been very good for this team. I think he's really helped reinvigorate this roster. He's brought a lot in terms of ability. He's a very good player, and he really elevates that flex tank position, which I think was their weakest point most of this season up until now. And I think that there was also some very good play coming from Profit on Echo, which was a huge sticking point at the beginning of the season when Echo first came in. Profit was not a good Echo. He has looked much better on the hero recently. So I thought the Dynasty actually showed a lot of promise this weekend, getting 3 big wins, really helping them get back to positive in terms of differential and record. Huge weekend from them. Very, very, very good stuff coming out of the Seoul Dynasty. And I think they're a team that are going to be dangerous going into playoffs because in Asia, it really feels like you have Shanghai number 1 and the number 2 spot's really open for whoever's hot at the time. Could be Guangzhou, could be New York, could be Seoul, could be Hangzhou, could even be Chengdu, could even be London. If the right team gets hot at the right time, I think anybody in Asia could be the second representative, and I think it's not a crazy thing to say that could happen. Some people might say, it would never be London or it would never be Chengdu. And I don't think any of those teams, I don't think London or Chengdu would ever beat Shanghai. But the other teams are certainly capable of beating Shanghai and are certainly capable of beating each other. Even a team like Seoul or Hangzhou, who have had some struggles this season, any of them could be in the top 4 come the end of the season and be the number 2 team in Asia going into the top 4 playoffs. So it's a really interesting region right now. Seoul, I think, looks very good. And I think that there's a very good chance they are the number 2 team coming out of Asia when all is said and done. Let's move on to what I thought was the biggest match of the weekend, best match of the weekend, the San Francisco Shock taking on the Philadelphia Fusion. A huge statement victory for the Philadelphia Fusion. I picked the Shock. I thought the Shock would win this one. I thought the Fusion underperformed in the Countdown Cup finals. I thought that the meta would be similar enough that the Shock would succeed in it. There was no Tracer, which did work in the Fusion's favor because that meant no Striker on Tracer. But we saw a lot of Sombra Ashe type compositions with some Genji as well at times. But that was kind of what we were seeing in the Countdown Cup. No Genji, I guess, was something that you could maybe say was a problem, but that was really where I thought the Shock played well, and I thought that the Fusion also played well. I thought that without Genji, the Shock would not really care that much. And I thought the Fusion played very well. They came prepared. They had a good grasp on the meta, and in times where I think the Shock didn't. The Shock looked kind of lost. Looked like they didn't fully understand what was going on. A lot of very good looks from the Philadelphia Fusion, and I think it's a huge win for them also because it helps them secure the number 1 spot in North America going into the playoffs. Destiny was in their hands. They could guarantee themselves the number 1 spot with a win over the Shock. They locked it up. They had everything to play for in that game. They had a lot more to lose than the Shock did. The Shock don't really care about stuff like that. It would be nice, I think, of course, if you're the Shock, to be the number 1 team, to win as many games as possible. But for the Fusion, it's you've had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to prove yourself, and they just never they couldn't do it. Second in the Summer Showdown, second in the Countdown Cup, 2 losses to the Shock before that, and I think the Fusion were just done with it. They didn't want to do it anymore. They were sick and tired of it, and they have really come up big. And it's very impressive what the Fusion have done. When you look at the Fusion's losses this season, right? They have 4 losses all season. 2 in the regular season, 2 in tournament play. Or 3 in tournament play, sorry. So they have 5 losses all season. And those losses are to the Eternal twice, the Shock twice, the 2 teams that have won tournaments so far, and then also the Mayhem once in the May Melee. So they've only lost to the top teams in North America, the top 4 teams, the other 3 top 4 teams. Whereas you look at the Shock, they've lost to the Gladiators and the Valiant and the Eternal and the Fusion. So there's a little more spread out. They've lost to some slightly weaker teams. So it's a very interesting thing to look at going forward. The Fusion have now proven they can beat the Shock, which I think was the big sticking point against the Fusion. They looked very good when they played the Eternal back in the Countdown Cup. So I think realistically, it's time to once again say the Fusion really are good. Like, they are really, really good. And the Fusion have shown that they have the ability to beat the Shock, which we didn't know if it was possible. And they not only beat them, but they beat them 3-0. It was a close 3-0. It wasn't a dominant 3-0 in the sense of, like, a complete, like, utter stomp. But the Fusion were in control that whole series. Kings Row, Shock had an incredible point B or Streets phase, and they got to the Foundry or the Factory, whatever you want to call it, and they just got stopped. It was incredibly impressive from the Fusion. I thought that they played very, very well. I thought that the Fusion looked arguably the best they've looked in a long time, if not the best they've looked all season. And I thought it was a very good win from them. The Shock had some weird stuff they did. Obviously, there was the moment where they had Violet on Lucio and Moth on Batiste. I don't really know why they were doing that. I don't know why their composition and their strategy revolved around putting two players on heroes that they're not as comfortable on. So it's weird. It's odd. The Shock just looked somewhat lost. So I'm not ready to say the Shock are boomed. The Shock aren't going to be that good. Like, they came out the next day. They came out, yesterday, and they completely rolled the Toronto Defiant. Now, the Toronto Defiant aren't nearly as strong of competition as the Fusion, but it is still noteworthy to look at and say, hey, the Shock didn't look great, but the Fusion capitalized on that. They made up for the mistakes of the Shock. They played very well, and I think that it's solidified the Fusion definitely as, I think, the team to expect to be in the top 4 come the end of the season when we get to the actual playoffs. I think they'll be one of the top 2 teams coming out of North America. No doubt in my mind, I think they're that good. As we move on to Sunday, we have the game that hurts me, that pains me. The LA Valiant reverse sweeping the Florida Mayhem. This one pains me because I didn't actually watch the second half of the game when the Valiant were sweeping. I fell asleep at halftime, and I was like, dang, this game's over. And I woke up to see McGravy having a victory interview, and I just thought, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. The Valiant were losing. So I don't have a ton that I can comment on for this. What I know from my limited time of witnessing what had happened in this game is it was very good performances from KSP. As always, the type of thing you'd expect from KSP to come up big. When KSP plays well, this Valiant team succeeds, I think, the most. Shaxx and KSF are very important to this team's success as well. When Shaxx can play Tracer, of course, this team is at their best, I think. And when he can't, they don't play as well. KSF's Sombra, the first couple points, a little weird, or the first couple maps, a little weird, a little odd. I don't know if things just changed throughout the series. I don't really know if it was something like come the second half he just kind of things started to click, or if KSF's Sombra is just better, because obviously last season Shaxx on Tracer was Shaxx on Sombra was a huge part of the success of the LA Valiant down the stretch. But KSF stuck through with it and started playing better in the second half, which is good to see. You know me, I love KSF. KSF's my boy. KSF's my dog. He's one of my favorite players in the league. So I love seeing KSF succeed, and I thought that his Sombra, from what I did see in the second half, was much better, and I was surprised that they opted to run him the whole time. These are two very good teams in the Mayhem and the Valiant. And I think the Valiant are a team who have had their ups and downs all season. They've always been kind of that number 5 team in the league. The Mayhem kind of solidified themselves as a top 4 team, and then, of course, they clinched a top 4 finish anyway, so it didn't really matter because they are a top 4 team regardless. But it was really interesting to look at this team and to see these teams play, because I think the Valiant are a team who they have what it takes to be a top 3 team. I think if the meta is in their favor, and I think they have a lot of room to grow and improve, but I also think they're a very scary team. You don't want to face the Valiant when they're hot and when they're playing well. They're dangerous. They have a lot of talent, and they have a lot of determination, and they have a fire under them that very few teams have. They really want to prove themselves because people doubted them from the very beginning, and I think it's really interesting to see. I don't think the Mayhem played poorly from what I saw. I just think the Valiant really stepped up in the second half and took the win. Final match of the week was the Vancouver Titans beating the Atlanta Reign 3-1. Very good performance, of course, from Shockwave. Shockwave always has good performances, so it's not that surprising. What's nice to see from this series, though, is that the Vancouver Titans very clearly have shown improvement. They have looked much, much better, and I think that they're a team that are going to be really interesting going in, especially to next season. I don't expect a lot from the Vancouver Titans this season, for the remainder of the season. I don't think they do either. players are still, strewn about the world, but clearly they brought in players with a lot of talent, who had definitely some doubters. They have some needs, of course. They don't have a true flex DPS player. They really have 3 hit scan DPS players. Shockwave and Dalton are just the most flexible of those 3. But they do have a need, I believe, for some more players to really boost this team. But I think they've played pretty well so far for a team that was really thrown together in really unfortunate circumstances. This is probably their best win of the season. Beating Dallas was pretty good. They have 2 wins over Boston in various types of matches and, qualification matches and whatnot. But this win was really good for them. This was a win I think that is really good because the Atlanta Reign are a good team. And what this series was the Atlanta Reign came in, they didn't look prepared. They looked like they were thinking it would be an easy match, easy win, no need to worry. And the Vancouver Titans took advantage of that. The Vancouver Titans saw the weaknesses in the play style of the Atlanta Reign, and they really dominated them. And the Reign were a team that I was looking at, and I was saying, they look like they could be a top 5, top 6 team. I think they're probably number 7 right now in North America. I think I'd put, obviously, the top 4 that you have with Shock, Fusion, Eternal, and Mayhem. I'd put them behind them, of course. And I think I would put the Valiant and the Gladiators both ahead of the Reign right now. Because the Reign, obviously, lost to the Paris Eternal. It's a very close series, and I think that you can't really take a lot away when they almost beat a really good team. But they lose to Vancouver in a way that just shows that they're not prepared. They're not motivated in the same way. The Vancouver Titans players have everything to play for, right? They want to continue to play in the Overwatch League going into next season. Going into the distant future, they want to still be in the Overwatch League. This was a really, really, really big moment for them to prove that, and you could see it in Shockwave after the match with his interview with Reinforce. He clearly was just so excited, and it was really great to see. So this was a good match. I think this is definitely one of the ones to watch if you didn't see it. Really good performances out of the Vancouver Titans. Shockwave in general is just such a good player. He's incredible. He's absolutely the best player on this Vancouver Titans roster right now. I think when this roster is able to gel, when they're able to play together in one place, have the time to really kind of work together, play together, live together, and in person, maybe not in the same house. Who knows what their living situation is going to be in the future. But when they're not playing in various corners of the world with tons of different pings, I think this Titans team has a lot of promise, and I'd love to see what types of things they do in the off season, because I think these players are really interesting, and they're a really fun team to watch play, just because these players are playing for everything, and that every single game these Titans players are giving their all, and it's really good to see. So it's a fun team to watch, and I hope to see more success from the Titans in the future. That's all I have for today. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this in the future. Comment down below your thoughts on any of the matches that happened this past weekend. I'd love to have a nice discussion with you and talk about it in the comments below, but that is all for me. I'm going to get out of here. Thank you once again. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.